Hi there and welcome to My Week. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for joining us. We have a lot to get to this week with big budgets and downtown development plans, and we'll have a deeper look at measures in Lansing to change parole and probation. But let's start in Detroit and that new proposal for the Wayne County Jail site downtown. Investor Dan Gilbert's Rock Ventures wants the site for a soccer stadium and entertainment development. He's offering to build a new justice complex less than 2 miles north of the jail site for the $300 million the county was going to have to spend anyway to finish the old site. And it's coming at a time where development and density in Detroit is changing rapidly, leading us to the question of what the city will look like 1 year from now. For some perspective, let's bring in Nolan Finley, the editorial page editor of the Detroit News, and Stephen Henderson, the editorial page editor of the Detroit Free Press. Guys, it's always good to see you. And my, what an interesting development this week. Just days before Wayne County was set to make a decision to move forward, the Rock Ventures folks come forward and say, well, if you're going to spend $300 million on finishing the jail, how about we build a $420 million complex, and then you just kind of give us the land. What do you see in this deal, Nolan, that's good, or what do you see that's a potential pitfall?
Well, yeah, and I think that's what we've all been looking for. Where's the catch? Where's the fine print? It sounds like an awfully good deal for Wayne County. They're locked in at a $300 million expenditure, what they would have had to spend anyway to finish the jail plus remodel Frank Murphy Hall of Justice. And instead, they spend the same amount of money. They get a new jail, entirely new courthouse. They get a new juvenile detention center thrown in, and they get then that all moved out of prime property on downtown, and that land back on the tax rolls, producing jobs and revenue. It's hard for me to find the downside.
Wayne County Exec Warren Evans says, "Well, we're going to have to take a look at this." And so, what are you seeing any potential pitfalls here, Stephen?
If there is a pitfall, it's in the numbers. It's in making this all add up so that the county is not spending more money than it was going to have to. And frankly, I think the county's in a position where it could say, "Look, if we're going to do this, we should spend less," because the incentive here is all for Dan Gilbert to get that land. I mean, the county has that land. They have a partially built jail sitting there. There's no reason for them not to finish that unless there's a reason to do it. What's the incentive? And I don't think it's unreasonable for the county to take that position. I think even broader, the question of what happens to that site ought to be under a little more public discussion than just, well, we're going to build another stadium, a fourth stadium in a 2-mile radius in downtown. Not that I mind the stadiums. I like the ones that we have. I think.
Are you questioning the viability of what's going into the stadium in terms of professional soccer?
No, I don't have any problem with soccer. But do we need a fourth stadium in downtown Detroit? Is that the maximum use for that site? That's a question that Dan Gilbert shouldn't be able to just answer alone. The public, the government should have some say over what happens in the way that we redevelop downtown. None of that is to say that this is a bad idea or that it's a bad offer. It just needs to be looked at, and the future use of that site needs to be something that we talk about.
Well, the $120 million is basically what he's paying for this site. It's going to be more than a stadium, as I understand it. There's going to be some mixed-use entertainment, lofts, commercial space, what have you, along with it. I mean, the government hasn't done much in terms of overall planning in downtown Detroit.
But that's a problem, right?
Well, I don't see it as one,
I think that maybe that leads to the larger conversation of what a downtown is beginning to look like right now.
Well, what downtown, there's a real shift underway, and there has been, from downtown mostly populated by government buildings, and now one that has a much wider mix of buildings, and the government use of that land, the government buildings, the courthouses, et cetera, becoming a much smaller player in the downtown
Well, it was
footprint.
mostly empty is what it was before. I mean, it wasn't mostly government used. It was mostly
what buildings were there
rotting,
were mostly government buildings.
Well, but they were mostly empty,
right.
Not contributing. And he's changed that picture. Dan Gilbert has changed that picture almost single-handedly, and there's no question that I think that's a good thing. Again, though, go to any other downtown. And just decide to build a stadium. To go to Chicago and say, well, I'm going to build a stadium on this site in the middle of the Central Business District, there are a lot of other people who would have a say in whether that makes sense in the spot where it is.
And
But
it
we
kind
live
of
a lot
leads-
of
hang on,
years
it kind
here.
of leads
We
to
haven't done that
the
here.
larger conversation that we've had among two of us, or the three of us, saying, gosh, in the next year or so, what is downtown going to look like? We've seen some significant.
Well, I think we're turning a corner here and really entering a new phase, because we're about done when they complete the Free Press building, which was also announced, and some of the other buildings. We're about done with the rehab work, and now you're starting to see this new hotel, the new Shinola Hotel with the building next door. You're starting to see new things actually go in the ground and come up, and that's going to be a really interesting new phase of this downtown redevelopment.
So who needs to lead the conversation, the larger conversation of how we want to make the
I
downtown?
mean, ideally, you'd have the mayor and city council playing a different role here. I don't have any problem with the DDA, of course, being part of that, but that's very, my point is that you go to any other city, you just don't have one person making all of the decisions about this stuff. We have that going on here. It's not a great idea.
But you don't want government to get in the way, and that's happened here.
It's not about getting in the way. It's about deciding.
We went through a long period where government was in charge of this and didn't do very well. Certainly,
Actually,
there has
government
to
wasn't
be.
in charge of it.
Certainly
Those were
there has to
privately
be
held buildings.
oversight. Certainly, there needs to be oversight. But I've been through so many master plans for downtown Detroit over the decades that never got done.
Well, there was no
and
private investment.
Now things are getting done because there's private investment.
Right, but they're not
And private vision.
They're not mutually exclusive. You
No,
can
there
have
should-
hold
there
on,
should be
hold on. You
oversight.
can have private investment, and you can have a master plan that private investment fits into. Every other city does it that way. Why should we be
the
different?
plan has to make sense for the people who are investing the money.
It
And I
also has to
think- and I
make
think we
sense,
can all
but
agree
even
on
more
that.
important, it needs to make sense for the city and the people who live here. And that is a tension that is not represented well in this equation.
It's hard to argue with the momentum we've been seeing here and the progress we've been making.
Go to the
Much of it
neighborhoods that aren't
apart,
benefiting
much
and tell them that.
Much it from it. Well, that's always going to be a problem. It's always been a problem. That has nothing to do with the planning of downtown.
Just
Detroit.
because there's momentum shouldn't mean that it should not be checked. All right.